Welcome to Dare, the show for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders who dare to shape the future. Your hosts today are Ned Hayes and Cecilia Mariani. Dare is brought to you by Darwaf, the superpower tech team that can make your vision a reality. The Dare Show is happy to welcome Damola Omotosho to the show today. He's a CTO in residence. He's a startup founder. He works with startups at Microsoft to help them get off the ground. And he's also a serial entrepreneur himself. So it's really fantastic to have you here with us today, Damola.
Thanks for having me, Ned. Really excited.
So first of all, I got to launch into your most recent startup, CardCraft. Tell us where that came from.
Oh, absolutely. More than happy. So CardCraft is an idea that actually started with just my family about almost 13 years or so ago now. I moved to the Pacific Northwest after spending most of my life on the East Coast. And at the time, my niece, the only really granddaughter at that time, was about 4 years old. And I have an older or younger brother, and we're in constant competition. And so as I was moving to the West Coast, I was trying to figure out how could I stay in touch, keep connected, and let my family and friends know I love them as getting my first job off the ground. And that was when the idea for CardCraft came. Essentially, I had spent the better part of a day running all over town to get the perfect card and to get the right gift and to actually stick this into the mail. And by the time you looked at it, it was, a couple of hours had passed. And so I thought to myself, there has to be a better way. And it really kind of led me down this path of gifting and gratitude and really staying connected and keeping in touch that I worked on and I built. Now, I let that idea sit for some time before ultimately really doubling down on it over the last couple of years. And lo and behold, when the pandemic began, who had a greeting card company that allowed you to send physical greeting cards in the mail or gifts remotely, it was this guy. And so that's a little bit about the background of CardCraft and really where it all started.
Well, it goes to that classic moment for almost every startup. There has to be a better way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know your tagline is CardCraft believes in the power of connection and the impact of the tangible written word. So I'm really interested in that kind of written word part. Like, do you have like robots writing cards for you, or how does that work?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. And one of the things that is really interesting about CardCraft and really just my background is I'm really big on this concept of tech that connects, especially as we're getting to this more AI world. There's something about the physical, the tangible that I hope doesn't get lost. And so greeting cards are a really American and really some other parts of the world practice it, but they're kind of like a timeless tradition. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the U.S. Postal Service has been so consistent over the country's entire lifespan, and people like to share and stay connected. And so, for me, the idea with CardCraft really started with wanting to essentially upgrade and update the method by which people essentially send a traditionally physical product into the digital world with convenience added. And so a big part of that is the actual cards are handcrafted. They're made in Portland, Oregon. And then we got two options. One in which we actually have a handwriting bot called Robbie the Robot. He has much better handwriting than I have.
So
And
it
then we
is
also
robots.
robots to some extent, but we actually mix it up. So in addition to that, we actually have artists and some of our staff on hand that are able to pen the messages as well. And so it's really optional. Yeah, and really allows us to create that personalized touch. The idea being that as we get more and more advanced, the handwriting will mimic yours over time. And so it's bringing that combination of technology to, once again, a traditional form of communication.
Right. I entirely agree with you. As we get more into AI and robotic systems and stuff, having that personal touch of a real human being touch this thing will make a difference. I think the handcrafts are going to come back because you're going to have all these cheap knockoffs and you'll be able to tell the difference. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So before the pandemic, several years before, you launched kind of a similar business called Gift Ribbon, right? So was that the seed of CardCraft? Was that different?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of talked about this from a standpoint of gifting. And the first Christmas that I had to go back to the East Coast, I found myself in a conundrum. It was either buy all the gifts on the West Coast and then take two or three bags, pay some baggage fees onto the East Coast, or essentially risk my life shopping last minute for Christmas. And
Amen,
so
brother. Yes, that's so true. Risk your life. Yeah.
exactly. Well, that December timeframe when the holidays are around, people just kind of lose their minds. And so for me, the problem actually started with figuring out the perfect gift. And I had an idea at the time for this concept that I call this or that, in which I present you two things, and I would ask you, would you rather have this or would you rather have that?
Mm,
And the idea behind it is that we're not so great at remembering in the moment what we want or what's on our wish list, but if I were to ask you, would you rather have an iPhone or an Android? Right, you usually gonna have a very strong reaction. And so the idea behind Gift Ribbon was that it would learn over time what you like, and then it would build this list that would make it easier for the gift giver, as well as the recipient to receive their gift. So I started with that when I then realized that I had a problem, and that was traditionally when you give a gift for a birthday, holidays, you name it, you typically include a card. And I didn't have cards. And so there was a bit of research that went into, well, I could go get, some from like Hallmark or from a
mhm.
different brand. And that's when I kind of started down this path of papercraft. Like what would it actually take to build a card and include it as part of the gift? What I found is that that was a very interesting business in and of itself. Essentially, there are folks who love gifts and love having people pick things out for them. And then there are people like my sister who I call a card and money person, meaning that she's like, don't send gifts, just send money. And so for me, figuring out how to include greeting cards and potentially either monetary or gift cards as part of the gifting options or solution is what led to the creation of CardCraft, which ended up being the more successful business. Essentially, it was easier, better, more economical to actually send a physical greeting card than it was to coordinate across different marketplaces, the different types of gift options, those kind of things. And so they're actually complementary, where one gave birth to the other, but they still could work together, or they still work together in the sense that if you're buying a gift, you're often going to want to use a card, and it's going to be a
Right.
CardCraft card. You're buying it within our ecosystem.
Right. And CardCraft really kind of took off this year. You won the early stage award from the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network. You really got kind of a spotlight on you. What did it mean to win that award, and how is the company going so far?
Well, first of all, the thing that I would say is when you take a step back and really look at business and entrepreneurship, building a startup in a business, it's not very pretty oftentimes. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of like times in which there are doubts, or the business isn't as profitable, or different things happen. And so CardCraft was no different in that sense, right? There were, post pandemic, there were some drops in terms of sales, and overall, like just trying to keep the business going has been one of those things where, as a founder, you have to kind of like ask yourself, well, is the return on investment there? Now, what I would say though, however, is, and this is something that I've learned in the process of building CardCraft, that it's not a matter of if, but when it comes to most things and most business, meaning that a lot of businesses ultimately can be successful if you stay at it for long enough. And so CardCraft has been that for me. And winning the Oregon Entrepreneur Network Award was a reinforcement of the idea and the belief that people see the work, the time, the effort that's going into building the business that is CardCraft. And so that was huge for me and for us, just because oftentimes you're building this business in what sometimes feels like a silo, but to have that recognition by the board and by the greater startup community, to be on stage with folks like Slumberkins and also Squad, people who have previously won the OEN award, was pretty huge for us, and so
Yeah,
it
really
continues to kind of propel
fantastic.
us.
Yeah, it was fantastic to see you on that stage, and really great startups this year, really moving forward quickly. Now, I should point out, like, you kind of have an edge because you actually work in the startup world, mentoring startups. So you work as part of the Microsoft for Startups organization. So tell us about what that is all about. You're kind of a CTO in residence, right?
Yes, absolutely. I always have a story, but the funny story about that, there's a guy in town, folks probably know him or heard of him. His name's Scott Hanselman. And almost 5 years ago or 6 years ago, He actually came to watch me do a talk. He brought his kids, and at the time I was working on a different product called Cut Up. It helped people find barbers and stylists.
Hmm.
And one of the things that happened after that call, because Scott's kids are mixed, and they need to find a barber who can meet their unique hair care needs, was Scott said to me, "You know, D, this is a really cool idea. And you know, I was at Intel at the time, and he says, and I think you got to try to figure out a way to make your what you do for your day job or what you do outside." And that like idea stuck with me. It stuck with me so much that I eventually applied to and started working at Microsoft, and then eventually found myself in the Microsoft for Startups team, where I could now be an entrepreneur. I can now build businesses. I can now relate to the startups and to the people I was guiding, but then also talk about business and really empathize with them as they build. And so
Right.
yeah, I have an awesome title, CTO in residence. It means that I get to work with, excuse me, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of founders as they're building their business, as they go from ideation all the way to scale and exit. And then I get to do it with the backing of a lot of really smart people at the Microsoft for Startups team.
Right. Well, and as Scott recognized, you have a great technical background. You've been a technical architect, you've been a senior engineer at Microsoft and Intel for a number of years. Before that, you were a CTO for Glue Health, which is an incentivized health platform. So you have loads of experience in the technical field. Am I right?
That is correct. And lots of fun and lots of experiments.
Yeah. So what's it like to go from designing software to actually running a company?
That's a great question because for the longest, I thought they were the one and the same, right? Like,
Ah,
you know, I have a very interesting background in that I'm very technical, as you mentioned. And oftentimes I would spend a lot of time thinking that I could just build and people would come. And what you realize when you stay at this long enough is that it's not enough to just build. You need to have a marketing strategy, you need to have a sales strategy, you need to have a team. You need to have people who will, you know, the best idea without marketing isn't going anywhere. And so for me, learning to design and build, engineer products or businesses versus running a business was a really transformative experience, something that I've worked on and I've honed over the past couple of years. And so I'm really excited because where I'm at now is a place in which I'm thinking about runway and I'm thinking about how to be leaner, how to really kind of I have this concept of 10xing. So if you're going to create a business or create anything now going forward, how do you make a dollar out of 10 cents with this
right.
idea and being able to answer that question before you dive headfirst into something. And so these are some of the things that have changed and evolved as I've gone from an engineer and building to an entrepreneur and a business person selling essentially.
Right, right. Well, so I'm curious. We have an audience that includes a lot of engineers and a lot of people who would like to start companies. And sometimes the Venn diagram of that is a big overlap. Sometimes it's smaller. I wonder if you could give us like 3 to 5 like hints or tips for engineers who are thinking about starting a company. What should people keep in mind as they move? They try to make the move that you've made.
I love that question because I think the first one is that the act of being an engineer, having a logical, systematic way of thinking about the world actually puts you at quite the advantage to start a business.
Mhm.
You know, this is one of the things that I think is important to kind of like stress and highlight is that just that the way of thought, the mindset is a big part of being successful as an entrepreneur as you build a business or a startup. So that's number one. Number two is to really be a curious individual, right? I think that, you know, I kind of said this at the beginning. It's like, well, there has to be a better way, or why is something like that? Is a question that we should ask more often, right? And engineers are particularly good at asking. I think there's a lot of opportunities all around us, whether it's the work that you're doing day to day, or as you see just problems and issues that come in your life that are ripe for really innovation. And I think that having that mindset and having that like eye is also going to be helpful as an engineer transitioning into business or entrepreneurship. Another piece of advice that I give is really kind of adopting this mindset of a marathon. Essentially, this is something that I've learned over the years as I've tried to, you know, just run really fast and think that I have to grow and scale and do all these things in a short period of time. What's really been beneficial is to take a step back and understand that most businesses, most startups are better thought of as a marathon, meaning that you want to run and you want to pace yourself in such a manner that ultimately you're going to get to that destination or make it to that finish line. And so those are some of the couple points that I think I would give to a new or aspiring entrepreneur, especially one coming from an engineering background. One more idea that I'm going to throw out there, just because I kind of talked about the idea for like gift ribbon and even for CardCraft, is that experimentation, whether it's via startup weekends or my personal favorite hackathons, is huge. And essentially, for those who don't know, a hackathon is a short period of time in which you build, go heads down, come up with a proof of concept, and pitch it out to the world. And a lot of my best ideas and even businesses have started off as just hackathons or things that I did for 24 hours for a weekend that ultimately turned into these businesses. And so I would really encourage anyone that's thinking about getting into it or who's maybe coming from an engineering background to kind of think about how you can take those same skills, very similar to the way Scott kind of encouraged me, and apply them in the entrepreneurial world and pursuits.
Right. Fantastic. Those are great, great tips. Thank you. You really had that at the tip of your fingers. So, right now, I notice you're currently finishing up your second master's degree, this time in artificial intelligence, right?
Yes, I'm actually working on a degree in artificial intelligence. I did my first degree in computer science, but one of the things that I started doing when I was finishing up that at Cornell was actually get into AI before it started
Or it was
turning
him.
into. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so always had a passion and interest in artificial intelligence. And one of the
Yeah.
things I really remember was at that time thinking that creativity and the usage of it really could show the potential of AI, and it's what we're seeing now. And so for me, it's important to really kind of double down on that and continue to push that as we start getting into more nuanced things like fairness in AI and responsible AI, as we're looking at things like the really kind of like the SAG after strike that just happened. As I'm building a business in which in theory you could have art and designs generated by AI. I want to be very mindful of it and then really be in the know, right, as the technology evolves, and also to be in an academic sense very knowledgeable of where this is all going.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot coming down the pike. Speaking of which, do you have any predictions? Where is this all going?
That's a great question. And all right, so this is where my creativity mixed with my nostalgia and love for movies comes in. So I'm a real big fan. Anybody knows me knows one of my favorite movies is The Matrix. And
Uh,
if you really kind of take a step back and you kind of look at it and really look at the progression of technology and just how things have evolved, essentially what we see in movies eventually becomes somewhat real. And so an idea and something I've been thinking a lot about in the Matrix. For those who don't know, there's a scene in which Neo has escaped from the Matrix. So they kind of unplug him from the system that's
yeah.
simulating the world. And then there's a scene in which they replug him back in. But what's really interesting is they teach him jujitsu. They teach him different fighting techniques. They teach him how to fly a plane. And this is all via this like brain human connection. I think that when it comes to AI, when it comes to software, and you're going to see this, and you're starting to see this with things like the Apple Vision Pro. Those are the Gen Zero V0 versions of what are still going to be integrated into your body, your brain, your mind, and it's all going to be layered with essentially kind of like brain software, right? And AI. And so the big thing I've been thinking about is really kind of what would you do, or can AI be an additional sensor? Can AI be additional compute? And then can AI make us superhuman, right? Essentially combine the best of what we as people do with what the AI does really well. I mean, things like, once again, CardCraft, the idea behind it is it will remember and remind you, and will send that message to make sure it gets there in time from the people that you love. Can we use technology and AI in that manner to be better humans, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, really the world is changing and we need to keep our eyes on the ball, so to speak, in terms of what we want to do from a moral and ethical point of view, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the last question that we always ask in this podcast is the big question. What do you dare to dream, D? What future do you dare to dream you are bringing to life?
I love that. And one of the things I'll share is working at Microsoft is awesome. It's a great company, but I have a dream in which I own and run my own software company.
Mhm.
And this company is going to focus on developing technologies and solutions that ultimately empower and support a combination of underrepresented founders, but really kind of push the boundaries of AI technology as well as the software field in general. And so for me, I foresee a lot of the current projects that I'm working on, things like CardCraft, Gift Ribbon, as the basis to do a couple things. First of all, show that I can actually run and I'm able to establish these businesses so that I can actually help others to do the same. Essentially, the projects and the things that I'm working on are the foundation for this future company in which I'm innovating through a combination of software, technology, artificial intelligence, but then I'm helping other entrepreneurs to do the same in their respective fields and industries. And so that's what I see for myself when it comes to kind of career and why I'm doing this level of studying when it comes to my education, as well as when I'm making decisions about what projects I work on and what I do with my spare time. And so that's the vision, the future I envision for myself and as a serial entrepreneur who just loves tech.
Wow, that's a great vision. I sure hope you get there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today. This has been a great conversation, really interesting. I wish you all the best with CardCraft and with the Microsoft for Startups work that you do.
Thank you, Ned.
Okay. Thanks to our guests today for their great insights on Dare, the podcast for innovators, entrepreneurs, and startup leaders. If you'd like your story to be featured on Dare, just contact us at info@darwaft.com. Dare is brought to you by Darwaft, the tech team that can make your vision a reality.